My name is Daniel Gardner and you're watching Chasing Cars. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe and the like, and maybe even consider hitting the bell icon so you know when another quality review like this one goes live. Today I'm looking at the Mazda CX-90, a significant car for Mazda. It arrives in Australia right now in 3 different variants. Opening the range is the Touring, in the middle of the range is the GT, and at the top of the pack is the Azami. This version, you can tell it's the Azami because it's got colour coordinated wheel arches. It rolls on these specific design 21-inch alloy wheels. Pricing. The range starts at about $74,000 and goes all the way up to just over $100,000. $100,000 for a Mazda, is it worth the cash? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. The CX-90 is a big car. We're talking large, if not large plus SUV. So I want to start at this end here to talk about the kind of space you get in the CX-90. It has a big boot. So even with all 3 rows of seating in place, it is a 257 litre boot, which is respectable. That includes a little bit under shelf space here, and underneath there, again, it's more good news because there is a space saver spare wheel, so you don't have to compromise with one of those awful mobility kits. If you fold this row of seating, the boot expands to 608 litres. And the interesting thing about the CX-90 is you can have a very special captain seat second row arrangement where you get 2 very plush middle row seats. Even when you do that, it doesn't sacrifice the 3rd row. This car is always a 3-row large SUV, whether it be 6 or 7 seats. You also get 12-volt power connection here, but next to it you get 220-volt main supply. Lots of bag hooks and things. It's a really well thought out boot. It's also a really nice shape as well. Really square, and you don't really get any wheel arch intrusion. So it's practical as well as big. This particular version has been optioned with the so-called captain's chairs in the 2nd row, which means tons more comfort, almost comparable to the front seats themselves. I've got lots of seat adjustment. I've got my own climate control panel with cooled and heated seats, USB-C charging, this lovely comfortable wide armrest where a 3rd seat would go in the standard car with more storage in there. It is a very nice place to spend an extended road trip. Other thing to point out is how easy it is to get into this 2nd row thanks to those huge doors that open almost 90 degrees. But that same feature makes it just as easy to get into the 3rd row as well. This has got to be one of the best 3rd rows I've ever experienced in a large SUV, and that's down to 2 very good reasons. One is that unique profile on the outside of the CX-90. It's perhaps a little bit awkward in its proportions, but it means you've got tons of headroom in this 3rd row seating. The other reason is they haven't tried to squeeze 3 seats back here, it's just 2, and that means plenty of width. I've got loads of elbow room. It doesn't feel as claustrophobic as some back here. And there's also plenty of comfort features as well. I've got a USB-C charger on each side, 2 cup holders, our own vents, our own lights. This has got to be one of the best in the market. Up front, the cabin continues to be a very impressive execution. Now, Mazda, it's very widely known, is pushing ever more into premium territory. It really started with the current generation Mazda 3, and it's continued through various SUVs to this. But this, don't forget, is the new flagship of the Mazda range, which means it has to go above and beyond. It can't just rinse and repeat what it's done in various models before. And to an extent, it does. But it's not quite that straightforward. This car is equipped with the Takumi package, which is an extra $6,500. And you have to spend that cash to get the really, really interesting stuff, like this beautiful texture on the dashboard with some cool stitching. This lovely quality Napa leather with a really cool sort of trim piece inserted down the middle. This beautiful maple wood finish. That'll all cost you an extra $6,500 on top of what is already a pretty pricey Mazda. There are other things that you do included for nothing, such as that huge screen. You've got these beautiful electrically adjustable seats, more leather on the steering wheel, excellent fully digital instrument cluster here. This is really, really well done. But as I say, it has to go above and beyond. And if you get this car in just standard trim, I'm afraid it just feels like an upscaled version of any other Mazda. There's other big news as well. So new technology in this car. Under the bonnet is an all-new engine, which is only launched in 1 other Mazda vehicle so far. And really, to explain where that positions this car, we have to go for a drive. Out on the road for a cruise gives me a great opportunity to get stuck into some of the features in the CX-90, starting with that big central touch screen. Now, I love it. A lot of people have said it's a bit simple and basic in its graphics, but simple needn't necessarily be a bit dull. It actually makes it very intuitive and easy to find your way around. The graphics are certainly simple and maybe a little bit lo-fi, but I don't mind that. I've also set the screen for people with not such great eyes. Now, I may be not such a spring chicken anymore, and with my vintage, having that feature to make it large print is actually quite a useful feature. But it also makes it way more concise. The way that the information is presented is done in a really good way. It feels a little bit like a Mazda system of old, upscaled for a larger screen, but that needn't necessarily be a bad thing. I've also got heaps of comfort features. I've got a heated steering wheel, heated seats, as you might expect, but also ventilated seats, which work particularly well through these heavily ventilated Napa leather seat covers. The visibility is excellent. In a car of this size, you actually sit very high up, and combined with some relatively thin A-pillars, lots of tall glass around me, the visibility is absolutely excellent. And then if that's not good enough for you, I've got loads of driver assistance and maneuvering aids. The 360 camera on this is one of the best in class. Resolution is excellent, and it combines tons of those maneuvering aids with radar all round to make it almost foolproof. I say almost because there's always a fool out there who proves the rule wrong. Hopefully not me today. But as I said before, the really big news with this car is what lies under the bonnet. Now, the CX-90 has already launched, and that was the car that pioneered this engine. It is, of course, Mazda's all-new straight-six internal combustion engine. Under the bonnet is a 3.3 litre straight-six turbocharged diesel that produces 187 kilowatts and 550 newton meters of torque. Those figures are not exactly front page headlines, but still very respectable. But really it comes down to the way that this car delivers that power and torque. And that's got a 48 volt electrical subsystem, which means it is hybridized. And then you get that lovely swage of diesel torque that comes in afterwards. So the character of this diesel engine is really nice. It's got the diesely kind of edge that you want it to have, with lots of torque, low down grunt, but also it revs out quite nicely to a red line of 5,000 RPM, which is pretty athletic for a diesel engine as well. Its versatility and its broad and breadth range is really, really good. But also it makes quite a nice sound. Now, straight-six diesel engines can have a bit of a commercial or agricultural sound to them, but this doesn't at all. And that comes down to a combination of really good NVH levels, good insulation from the engine bay, but also it has an augmented sound played through the speakers in here. It's also very loud, that augmented sound, one of the loudest I've experienced, but it's also one of the most believable and convincing. Some augmented sounds are completely laughable and don't sound anything like a real engine, but Mazda designed that based on the actual mechanical sound of that diesel engine and then added to it, enhanced it. And the result is fantastic. It's kept noise levels low in the cabin when you want them to be, but also when you get stuck in with that right pedal, it sounds quite satisfying and rewarding as well. So the diesel engine gets a big tick from me. It's efficient, it's torquey, it sounds great, and it has a really good pairing with that automatic transmission. But I'm afraid, paired with that slightly choppy ride, it doesn't make a very good combination. The diesel says comfort and silkiness and relaxation, but the ride says kind of sportiness and a little bit urgent and sudden. But there is a solution. In addition to the eSkyActiv-D engine, Mazda also developed in parallel this engine, the eSkyActiv-G. 3.3 litres, straight six also, but this is a petrol. And that makes all the difference, because I've got 254 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, so still respectable power outputs, but the way a petrol delivers them is completely different. This car is actually a bit of a performance proposition. Mazda says this car will do 0 to 100 in less than 7 seconds, and I believe it. So we're talking hot hatch territory in a car that has room for 6 or 7 people on board and all the space of a plus size large SUV. That is making a lot of sense to me. Lots of cars in one. Also, the sound of the engine is gorgeous. You're actually getting proper straight 6-cylinder performance sound in here. Again, a little bit more augmented soundtrack coming through the speakers, but again, it's done respectfully and sensitively. So I've gone from that diesel engine, which I like in isolation in itself, but perhaps doesn't make such sense when paired with a car with a slightly sort of harsh ride quality. However, once you get into this car with the petrol engine, with a genuine performance proposition, it makes an awful lot more sense. Because we can always forgive a performance-focused car with a slightly firmer ride if it returns those really good dynamics along with the performance to match. I really like the package that Mazda has presented with the CX-90. With those 2 engine choices and 3 variants, there is something for everyone as long as you've got a budget big enough. The pricing is not my biggest problem with this car. It's about whether we're still okay with combustion 6-cylinder engines in large SUVs. About the point when Mazda was deciding to develop this engine, everyone else was deciding to go electric or hybridized. Now, a plug-in hybrid version of this car is on the way, but my question is whether it's looking a little bit dated before it's even arrived. Combustion power, as we know, is on its way out whether you like it or not. I have to say though, that while Australians continue to buy diesels and petrols in large cars of all types, this Mazda, while focused on a global market, probably arrives in Australia at exactly the right time.